the morning light filtering through the expansive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the Forrester Creations CEO office illuminated a scene of unprecedented betrayal and raw emotional vulnerability. The heavy, suffocating silence of the room was a stark contrast to the passionate, intoxicating storm that had raged just hours before. Steffy Forrester Finnegan, the formidable and usually unshakable co-CEO, found herself entangled in a reality she could scarcely comprehend. The remnants of a heavily intoxicated night of shared grief and desperate comfort lay scattered across the luxurious space. She had sought refuge here to escape the suffocating trauma of Monaco, the haunting specter of Sheila Carter, and the agonizing realization that her husband, John Finnegan, had kept a massive, marriage-shattering secret. Instead of isolation, she had found Carter Walton, a man equally broken by the sudden departure of his wife. As Steffi slowly gathered her bearings, the physical reality of what had transpired between her and Carter began to set in with a crushing, paralyzing weight. This was not merely a drunken mistake to be swept under the rug. It was a catastrophic collision of two shattered souls desperately seeking an anchor in a tumultuous sea of emotional devastation. For Steffi, the memory of throwing her wedding ring at Finn on the sun-drenched beach of the French Riviera was still searingly fresh. She had fled across the Atlantic, her heart pounding with the terrifying realization that Finn's inexplicable empathy for his biological mother would forever endanger their family. Now, sitting in the quiet aftermath of a forbidden night, Steffi felt a chaotic mixture of profound guilt and an undeniable, startling sense of safety that she had not felt in months. Carter Walton, the steadfast and fiercely loyal coup of Forrester Creations, was undergoing a monumental psychological shift of his own. For weeks, he had been drowning in the agonizing sorrow of Daphne's severe infertility diagnosis and her subsequent, heartbreaking decision to flee to Paris. He had believed his world was ending, his lifelong dreams of a family turning to ash in his hands. Yet, as he looked at Steffi in the soft morning light, a sudden, blinding epiphany washed over his entire being. The night they had just shared was not a fleeting moment of weakness, but a profound, undeniable awakening. He realized with absolute certainty that he could not live without the fierce, beautiful, and fiercely protective woman sitting before him. The shared grief that had drawn them together had forged an unbreakable bond, igniting a love so powerful it threatened to consume everything. Driven by this overwhelming revelation and a desperate need to protect the woman he had just claimed, Carter made a move that would forever alter the landscape of Forrester Creations and the lives of everyone involved. He approached the grand mahogany CEO desk, the very epicenter of Steffi's professional power, with a determined, uncompromising glint in his eye. He wasn't just offering a shoulder to cry on anymore. He was offering a completely new life, a sanctuary from the madness. The air in the office grew thick with anticipation as Carter reached into his tailored jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that held a dazzling, brilliant-cut diamond ring. The sheer audacity of the moment was breathtaking. Right there, amidst the lingering shadows of their passionate indiscretion, Carter Walton dropped to one knee. Steffi's breath hitched violently in her throat, her wide, disbelieving eyes locked onto the glittering gemstone that seemed to capture the morning light and amplify it into a blinding beacon of hope and terror. She was entirely paralyzed by shock, her mind struggling to process the monumental weight of the gesture. This was moving at a velocity she could not comprehend. Just yesterday, she was fighting for her life and her sanity against the looming threat of Sheila Carter in Europe. Now, she was being offered a completely different future by a man she had considered a trusted friend and colleague for years. Carter's voice, deep and resonant with unwavering conviction, broke the heavy silence, delivering a speech that struck at the very core of Steffi's deepest fears and desires. Carter's proposal was not just a romantic declaration of love. It was a solemn, ironclad vow of protection. He looked deeply into Steffi's tear-filled eyes and promised her the one thing John Finnegan had utterly failed to provide: absolute, uncompromising peace. He vowed to shield her from the relentless nightmare that was Sheila Carter, swearing that as long as he drew breath, that psychotic woman would never come near her or her children again. He pointed out the chaotic cycle of trauma she had endured, the constant anxiety of looking over her shoulder, and the agonizing betrayal of a husband who continuously prioritized his biological mother over his wife's safety. Carter offered himself as an impenetrable fortress, a man who would never compromise her security. The contrast Carter painted with his impassioned words was stark, brutal, and undeniably accurate. On one side was Finn, a man whose chaotic emotional ties to Sheila had repeatedly dragged Steffy into life-threatening situations. Finn's naivety and his desperate need to believe in Sheila's redemption had proven to be a fatal flaw in their marriage. A blind spot that had nearly cost Steffi her life in the alleyway behind I El Giardino. On the other side stood Carter, representing unwavering stability, fierce loyalty, and a love completely devoid of the terrifying baggage that had haunted Steffi for years. Carter's words wove a compelling narrative of a future where Steffi could finally breathe, where she could rule her fashion empire without the paralyzing fear of an ambush. As Carter's impassioned words hung in the air, Steffi's mind became a violent whirlwind of conflicting emotions and terrifying possibilities. The temptation to simply say yes, to surrender to the safe, secure haven Carter was offering, was incredibly strong. She was so utterly exhausted from fighting. The severe PTSD from being shot by Sheila, the constant, draining vigilance, the heartbreak of Finn's deception on the flight to Monaco, it had all drained her spirit to the point of breaking. Carter's sparkling diamond ring represented an immediate, tangible escape from the suffocating reality of her broken marriage. Yet the sheer, blinding speed of this transition terrified her to her very core. Could she truly pivot from the devastating end of her marriage to fin straight into an engagement with Carter? Meanwhile, on the other side of the sprawling city of Los Angeles, a frantic and deeply desperate John Finnegan was tearing the streets apart in a frantic search for his wife. Having just landed on a commercial flight from Monaco, Finn was consumed by a suffocating, crushing wave of guilt and panic. The volcanic, terrifying rage unleashed upon him by Ridge Forrester in Europe still echoed in his ears, a brutal, unforgiving reminder of his colossal failure as a husband and a protector. Finn finally understood the catastrophic magnitude of his mistake. By striking a secret pact with Sheila on the airplane and hiding her presence from Steffi, he had shattered the foundational trust of their marriage into a million irreparable pieces. Finn's internal monologue was a chaotic, agonizing loop of regret and fierce determination as he navigated the Los Angeles traffic. He mentally rehearsed the desperate apologies he would offer, the solemn promises he would make to eradicate Sheila from their lives permanently, even if it meant taking a restraining order or moving to another country. He envisioned finding Steffi at the Cliff House, or perhaps seeking solace at Forrester Creations, and sweeping her into his arms to mend the broken pieces of their family. He was completely, tragically oblivious to the fact that the woman he was frantically searching for was currently standing in the Forrester CEO office, staring down at a magnificent diamond ring offered by the company's chief operating officer. Back in the pristine, high-stakes environment of the CEO office, the catastrophic implications of Carter's proposal began to unfold in Steffi's mind like a complex, terrifying game of chess. If she accepted this ring, it would not merely be the start of a scandalous new romance. It would be the official declaration of a thermonuclear war within the Forrester family and beyond. The revelation that she had slept with Carter Walton and agreed to marry him just hours after fleeing her husband would send seismic shock waves through Los Angeles high society and the global fashion industry. Ridge Forrester, who was already on the warpath against the Spencer family and furious with Finn, would be thrust into a completely new paradigm of corporate and personal chaos. Steffy vividly visualized the explosive, devastating fallout that would inevitably follow her acceptance. How would her mother, Taylor Hayes, react to her daughter jumping from one massive crisis directly into the arms of the company's coup? How would Thomas, Ridge, and Eric process the sudden, shocking elevation of Carter from a trusted executive to the potential patriarch of Steffy's family? And what of Daphne Rose Walton? The poor woman had just left for Paris, completely unaware that her husband had not only moved on, but was actively proposing to her best friend and boss. The sheer volume of collateral damage, the shattered friendships, and the ruined reputations this union would cause was staggering. Yet, as she looked down at Carter, his dark eyes filled with an intense, burning devotion that she had never seen before. The paralyzing fear of scandal began to violently war with her desperate, primal yearning for peace. Carter was not a man given to impulsive, reckless decisions. His entire career was built on logic and stability. His proposal, though shockingly fast, was rooted in a deep, long-standing respect and admiration that had suddenly, violently ignited into passionate love. He was offering her a literal fortress. He was offering her a life where the cursed name Sheila Carter would never again be spoken with terror. For a woman suffering from severe, untreated PTSD, the promise of an impenetrable shield was the most seductive offer imaginable. The dichotomy of her agonizing choices stood starkly and brutally before her, tearing her heart into two distinct pieces. On one hand, there was Finn, the father of her beloved son, Hayes, a man she had loved with every fiber of her being, but a man whose fatal, inexplicable blind spot for his biological mother had nearly gotten them both killed. Finn represented a love that was passionate and deeply romantic, but inherently chaotic, a constant, terrifying tightrope walk over a bottomless chasm of danger. To return to Finn meant returning to the endless, exhausting cycle of apologies, broken promises, and inevitable betrayals regarding Sheila. It meant living in a state of perpetual anxiety, forever waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the other hand, there was Carter Walton, a man who had proven his fierce loyalty to the Forrester family time and time again, standing as a pillar of strength through their darkest hours. A man who had suffered his own brutal heartbreaks with Quinn and Daphne and emerged with a profound, mature understanding of what it meant to truly cherish and protect a partner. Carter represented absolute stability, emotional maturity, and an unwavering, fierce commitment to her physical and emotional safety. But choosing Carter also meant navigating the treacherous, unforgiving waters of a highly publicized, scandalous affair. Dealing with the inevitable, tearful return of Daphne, and facing the harsh judgment of the entire world. The tension in the CEO office was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Carter remained steadfastly on one knee, his hand perfectly steady as he held out the brilliant diamond ring, a physical manifestation of his sudden, overwhelming devotion. He did not push, he did not demand an immediate answer or try to manipulate her vulnerability. He simply offered himself as a permanent sanctuary. "I know it's incredibly fast," Steffy, Carter's voice murmured, breaking the heavy, suffocating silence of the room. "I know the entire world will judge us. I know the brutal battle that lies ahead of us, but I also know, with every fiber of my being, that I can give you the peace you so desperately deserve. Let me be your protector." Steffi closed her eyes, a single, hot tear escaping and tracing a slow, agonizing path down her cheek. The vivid memory of the previous night flashed brilliantly in her mind, the raw, unfiltered honesty of their shared grief. The desperate, frantic clinging to each other in the dark, the surprising, earth-shattering perfection of their physical connection. It had been a night of beautiful, reckless rebellion against the suffocating pain that had consumed them both. But was it a solid foundation for a lifelong marriage? Could a love born from the smoldering ashes of two spectacular, devastating marital implosions truly survive the harsh, unforgiving light of day and the wrath of their respective spouses? As she wrestled with these monumental, life-altering questions, the distinct sound of hurried, desperate footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the executive suite. Finn was in the building. He had bypassed security, his sheer desperation fueling a frantic, breathless sprint through the familiar corridors of Forrester Creations. He was mere moments away from bursting through those heavy mahogany double doors, ready to pour his shattered heart out, ready to drop to his knees and beg for a second chance that he desperately hoped she would grant. The ultimate collision course was set, the ticking clock counting down to an explosive confrontation. The man who had broken her heart and the man who was offering to heal it were about to converge. Steffy's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped, terrified bird. She stared intently at the dazzling diamond ring, its flawless facets reflecting a future that was both terrifyingly scandalous and incredibly, irresistibly alluring. She had to make a choice, and she had to make it in this exact, suspended moment in time. Would she slowly close the velvet box, gently reject Carter's desperate bid for love, and turn to face the chaotic, painful, but familiar reality of her marriage to Finn? Would she try to salvage the shattered trust, knowing deep down that the dark, looming shadow of Sheila Carter would always threaten to destroy their happiness? Or would she do the unthinkable? Would she reach out her trembling hand, take the diamond ring, and place it on her finger, sealing a permanent pact of protection and passion with Carter Walton? To do so would be to light a match and drop it directly into a powder keg. It would instantly end her marriage to Finn in the most brutal, unforgiving way possible, igniting a vicious war that would tear the Forrester family apart, destroy Carter's pristine reputation, and turn her professional sanctuary into a bloody battlefield of jealousy and revenge. The brass doorknob to the CEO office began to turn slowly, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. Steffi's breath caught in her throat. The absolute climax of this agonizing emotional journey had arrived. She was standing at the absolute, terrifying precipice of her life. The decision she made in this fleeting, suspended second would dictate the entire trajectory of her future, the absolute safety of her children, and the ultimate fate of the Forrester Empire. As the heavy wooden doors began to swing open, revealing the frantic, desperate, and tear-stained face of John Finnegan, Steffy Forrester Finnegan made her ultimate choice, plunging the fashion world into a saga of unparalleled drama and devastating emotional fallout.